the Lions being opening new tackle. Ben Brown as well from PFF going to join.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's good, everybody? Matt Dery with you. It is a Wednesday edition of Locked On Lions right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, Wednesday, May 10th and Thursday, May 11th. Thanks for checking us out wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, subscribing and watching for free on our Locked On Lions YouTube channel. You can follow us on Twitter at Dery Speaks, at Locked On Lions on Twitter, the Matt Dery Facebook fan page as well. Coming up on the show today, I'm hearing rumblings about primetime week 1. I'll fill you in coming up momentarily here on the program. Also, Ben Brown, data, betting, analysis, Pro Football Focus, his maiden voyage with us right here on Locked On Lions. Ben is our guest today. And Lions have a new defensive tackle. I've been saying they need to add some interior D linemen, and they have one in the mix. We'll tell you all about that coming up today right here on the program. Thanks for making us your first listen, checking us out. Again, wherever you get your podcasts, Locked On Lions today is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. Tomorrow night, we're going to have the show right at 8 o'clock. I'm going to record at 8, so it should be out about 8:30, 8:45. Following the announcement of the Lions schedule. Throughout the day tomorrow, if you're on Twitter or social media, you're going to see certain things getting leaked. Oh, the Thanksgiving game, week 18, week 6, this, and that. As of right now, the Lions are not going to Germany. There were rumors about a Kansas City, Detroit, Germany game. Instead, it's the Chiefs and the Dolphins over in Germany. But I'm hearing from some reliable sources, Lions at Chiefs in week 1 is, quote, a possibility. That would mean Thursday Night Football in week 1 to open the season. Dan Campbell and the Lions against the Super Bowl champion Chiefs at Arrowhead. Lions going to KC for the first time since, 2003? I'm hearing it's a possibility. I'm not reporting it. I'm not telling you it's a done deal. I've heard some rumblings. It's a possibility. I've been saying it since the schedule came out and who the Lions were playing. Give me Detroit and Kansas City in week 1. Let's do the business. The upstart 9-8 Lions nearly made the playoffs last year. America's team going up against the big bad Chiefs. I think it'd be great. Now, the Chiefs have to play the Eagles this year and the Bills. Maybe they'll make those matchups the opening night. But I'm hearing some rumblings. It's a possibility that Detroit could play Kansas City in week 1. So we'll see. I also think you'll see Lions-Bears or Lions-Vikings in week 18. I don't think they're going to give us Lions-Packers again. And then I would think the other game would be Lions-Bears or Lions-Vikings on Thanksgiving as well. So we'll have to see. I can't wait to play the Bears and Justin Fields again after all the hype that he's been getting this offseason. So tomorrow night, again, we'll record right at 8 o'clock once the schedule comes out. Take a look. I'm not going game by game tomorrow, but we'll take a look, see how it looks, plays out. How many primetime games are the Lions going to get? I've seen some people say they should get 5 primetime games. 5? I don't know about 5. But to me, they should be on in primetime with a Sunday nighter, a Monday nighter, maybe even another Thursday nighter, plus Thanksgiving. They should be in prime time 4 times, in my opinion. Lions are exciting. They're fun, personalities, and they're the favorites to win the division. Who wants to watch Green Bay anymore? Aaron Rodgers is gone. Minnesota, boring. Bears, yeah, I guess. Hall of Fields. Lions, Peter King had them as the third best team in the NFC. Let's give them a little love here and put them in prime time. Lions signed a defensive tackle today. They announced the signing of 30-year-old Christian Covington, who for the last 2 years played for the Chargers, has played in the NFL for 8 years. He was with the Bengals in 2020, started started 32 games in his career. Best year came 2 years ago with the Chargers, 52 tackles, 3 tackles for a loss, a sack, and a forced fumble. Last year, played for LA with the Chargers, tore his pec muscle in week 10, and missed the rest of the season. So with Brockers gone, needed another veteran inside, D tackle. You got Levi Onwuzurike, you got Aleem McNeil, Josh Paschal, Benito Jones, Isaiah Buggs, certainly Broderick Martin, the 3rd-round pick, but this gives the Lions a little bit of depth. I like the pickup. Covington is a solid NFL vet. We'll see if he makes the team and if he can stick. Again, 2 years ago, he played very well for the Chargers. So I've said it. I think the Lions continuously need to be adding and continually need to be adding D tackles. I think that's where they're a little bit weak right now. They got guys like Kaminsky who are better playing outside than inside. Same with Paschal, but I think Josh Paschal is going to have a big year. But I like the addition of Christian Covington, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. All right, Ben Brown from Pro Football Focus. Our first time having Ben on the show. We are excited about that. We will do that and talk to him. Coming up next, Locked On Lions is sponsored by BetterHelp. Get to know yourself can be a lifelong process. You maybe want to talk to a therapist and work on yourself. All right. Good idea to talk to somebody, to get therapy. It's about deepening your self-awareness and your understanding. Best place to go to do that is at BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on the journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. And the great thing about BetterHelp is everything is done online. If you're thinking about starting a therapy, BetterHelp, you got to give them a try. Everything's online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. You can change therapists if you want at any time for no additional charge. Just discover your potential with BetterHelp. That's BetterHelp.com. Go there, BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. And you get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. A new face from our friends at PFF joining us here on Locked On Lions today on this Wednesday, the eve of the schedule release. Ben Brown is with us from Pro Football Focus. Ben, thanks for the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. Like you said, I definitely get into the schedule release a little bit from, a betting perspective and everything else, trying to figure out some of these, angles and insights for how teams maybe stack up given the, the strength of schedule, but also kind of how they position it. So I appreciate you having me on. It's always good to chat.
No, appreciate you coming on. Before you came on, I kind of mentioned this. I've got a couple of people whispering to me that Lions Chiefs to open the season is a possibility. Okay. That's what I've been told. What would you think about that?
I mean, I like it. I know the Chiefs have a few, I would say, really solid games, I would say, kind of on their schedule. It sounds like Cincinnati's kind of locked in for that New Year's Eve matchup. So I think Detroit is intriguing. We do get the AFC, NFC, matchup. I do think in a lot of ways it kind of shows the trajectory that the Detroit Lions are on from, the entire, I would say, NFL league-wide outlook for them. I think it just speaks to them, being very much relevant and not only probably the playoff race, but maybe even getting a little bit further than that. So I think it's exciting times for Detroit. And I think I would love to see that matchup, I think, for sure in week 1.
It's interesting. Peter King earlier in the week, and I know I mentioned it on my Monday show, said, look, this is the top 6 team. He ranked the NFL teams, obviously Philly had at the top and KC and Buffalo and some others and San Francisco. And then he had the Lions at 6. Is that too high, too low in your mind? And what do you think?
Yeah, I think it is tough, right? So we're kind of doing some, currently we kind of do some things with the schedule, but kind of during that time frame, we do a lot of our roll forward of our models, and that's kind of the area that I would say kind of fit into now. So we have like a PFF ELO ranking for every single team. We have some Massey ratings and everything else. And these things kind of all become like a composite outlook for how the grades have performed previously. But in some of these metrics, we have the Detroit Lions as a top 10 team. We have them as the 9th best team in our ELO ranking. So I think 6 might be maybe a little bit high, because I do think the AFC in general is just going to have a little bit more stacked team. But we have Detroit right now, I would say, as like the fourth best team in the NFC, and I think that's fairly accurate. I think that could very much be, a spot where they can kind of carry their own weight, I would say, here coming up in 2023.
So wait, they're behind Philly, the Niners, and who's the third team?
So we got Philly, the Niners, Dallas. We probably have a little bit overrated. I think that's probably the team. So we have Philly, San Francisco, and Dallas ahead of them in the NFC. We have them ninth overall. We have them sandwiched kind of between the Jets, Baltimore, Detroit, and then Miami kind of round out our top 10 there with Dallas sixth overall. I think Dallas is probably maybe a little bit more egregious, probably the most egregious one of the top 10. I'm not sure, where that fits in, but I do think there is at least some continuity with Mike McCarthy and, Dak Prescott, even though they're going to lose Kellen Moore. And I do think that's probably going to have some impact, I would say, on their offensive output.
You look at what the NFL needs to be doing, and certainly announcing the schedule tomorrow, and we're recording here on Wednesday afternoon. And, like you said, there's been some games placed. Christmas Day, I know the Eagles and Giants are playing. I know some people don't like a Christmas Day game at 4 p.m, but Lions haven't been moved yet into any of these big games that have been announced already, and they're not going overseas. But how many primetime, night games do you think Detroit will get?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you're probably looking at, 2 or 3, like you said, like the Kansas City game obviously matters. I do think Seattle at home is also going to be a pretty intriguing match with two teams that I think are very much going to be relevant in the NFC playoff race. So I do expect that probably to be, another one there. And then I think there might be a division matchup game, obviously, with either Minnesota or Green Bay. It does seem like the NFL will probably project the Vikings to probably be the second best team in the NFC North right now. So I do think maybe their matchup, especially with Detroit at home, could very much be relevant there. So I think you get 3, outside of the Thanksgiving Day game. So I think you're maybe looking at 4 of 17, which, is very much, I would say, a pretty decent spot to get to for the Detroit Lions.
What intrigues you the most, Ben Brown, about this Detroit team? And obviously winning 9 games last year, kind of being the betting favorite right now for the NFC North out in Vegas. But what stands out for you as to why this team all of a sudden is getting a lot of national love?
Yeah, it did start last year. I know we talked a little bit about it off air. My former colleague, Eric Eager, kind of at least the guy in the national media to maybe restore the roar a little bit there. But I think they do it in, a lot of intriguing ways that kind of fit into the direction that this team wants to go from an offensive perspective, right? Like, I think you can obviously maybe hate on the Jahmyr Gibbs pick at 12th overall, saying that's a little bit of a reach, but I think they want to win with sound, rushing the football type plays. And I think they have that in a guy like Taylor Decker at left tackle. I think they kind of have that with Penei Sewell as well. So they have the bookend tackles. I think interior offensive line may be a little bit more concerning, but I think they can rush the football. I also think Amon-Ra St. Brown very much kind of, I would say, trending to be like a top 5 receiver in football. And when you have that guy, obviously pairing him with a Jared Goff type player, like, he's going to maximize Goff's ability. So I think maybe the one qualm is going with a guy like Gibbs over maybe getting a high end wide receiver option, but that really didn't make a ton of sense given, the value that was there at the 12th or maybe even the 18th overall pick. But I think offensively, if you are going to get more of an upside type season from Jared Goff, and I do think, where he was at last year, I think it's like his 4th best PFF WARD grade throughout his career. Like, if you can get that, you're winning the NFC North, right? And I think that's where the intrigue kind of comes in, because you can look around, obviously, and maybe they don't stack up as one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the AFC, but the NFC, they're definitely right there. So I do think there's definitely some pieces to get excited about, and I think it very much starts offensively.
It's interesting. The more I watch Gibbs tape, the more I like him. But I'm still with you a little bit in a sense that, man, could they have done something else, help the defense, still gotten him at 18? Obviously, they got the middle linebacker they wanted at 18, but are you kind of in the boat of, all right, I hated their draft after the first night, but then after it was all said and done, I kind of see what they were doing?
Yeah, I very much think so. And I think that, the hate after the first round is probably justified, because not only does it seem in some ways like they reach for both players, but non-premium positions is something that PFF specifically is just going to, in some ways try to drive home. And I think that's got to be the frustrating part, because I think the 2 picks in the first round, one difference Detroit kind of looked around at their roster, realized like maybe we don't need those difference makers at the key positions, and they're more so taking luxury guys at these high-end draft picks. And I think that's got to be the concerning part. But I think getting, a guy like Brian Branch in the second round, probably one of the best, going up there and actually getting a guy that was very much slipping. I think that he really well, as a starting strong safety for them / nickelback type player. But I think the concern again, with Detroit is you do look around in the secondary, and they could have had an opportunity to take a guy, at 6th overall. Obviously, Devin Witherspoon going 5th. Maybe that was the guy that they targeted and decided to drop back, but they really didn't. I would say outside of Brian Branch, I would say alleviate the concerns that they're going to have in their secondary. When you look at who they have on their roster, like they're going to have 5 new guys at all of the secondary positions. So I think that's, a pretty big change and a pretty tall task to see that unit playing at a high level really early on in 2023 to give this offense a chance, I would say, at winning every single football game.
But Ben, you got to like who they added though, right? I mean, to me, the upgrade at corner and safety from a year ago, heck, 2 years ago is monstrous, isn't it? I just know they're all on 1-year deals for the most part.
Right. I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson specifically is like a really good cornerback. In some ways, that's maybe the spot that you want Branch to potentially fill in at that strong safety / hybrid, but having that opportunity on both sides of your coverage formation, I think is really going to help the play inside. So I think Emmanuel Mosley bumping out to, the wide side cornerback position can definitely be a fit, but I still think it's just a lot of moving pieces coming together at once. And in some ways you do want some continuity at these, weak link type systems. And the Detroit's is very much not getting that heading into 2023. I do think all 5 of these guys can gel and form a really productive unit, but I think there has to be some expectation of some growing pains, I would say, heading into 2023. So it'll be interesting kind of how the schedule breaks out for them kind of through that first part, their first 4 or 5 games this season, in my opinion.
PFF's own Ben Brown, data analysis, even betting is in your title. We will touch on some of that with Ben. I don't want to get into the rest of the roster, and certainly the NFC North. We'll do that coming up next. Ben Brown with us from Pro Football Focus. Appreciate his time here on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Lions. I never seem to know the day, Ben, but I know now because we got the schedule release coming out tomorrow, which should be exciting. All right, we touched on the rookies a little bit and certainly the draft. And all in all, when you look at the Lions and that offense and getting Ben Johnson back, the Jared Goff situation, Hendon Hooker has been drafted, but it sounds like he's redshirting. How do you look at that quarterback situation? And is this going to be an offense that you think even goes even further in terms of their development this season? Or do you think maybe last year was a bit of a mirage?
It doesn't really seem like it was a mirage, kind of going back to it. Like Jared Goff definitely played better than what he had in 2021 or 2020, but this is very much, I would say, kind of the range or expectation that you could have for Jared Goff as kind of like a mean performance. So if you do have another year with Ben Johnson, if you do think he is, kind of has the makings to potentially be a head coach very quickly because he is such a, successful offensive coordinator, I don't think it's too much of a task to say that we do see even a little bit more of an improvement with Jared Goff in 2023. And then when that happens, it opens up everything else, right? Then you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is, once again, developing into a top 5 wide receiver. And you have some of the intriguing pieces, I would say, at the tight end position with Sam Laporta, maybe being that kind of like smash mouth player, but also contributing some, to the receiving unit as well. So I think you can see them, I would say, take another step forward. And I think that's got to be a big part of the excitement, especially from, the national media, is holding on to Ben Johnson very much when he was probably expected to be a head coaching candidate, and actually allowing Jared Goff another year in this system, I think, is only going to benefit everybody. And I think it's the reason why you do see the Detroit Lions as the NFC North favorite right now.
What about the rest of the division? How does it stack up? I know there's people on the Bears bandwagon. I know you're up in Minnesota. No one's talking about the Vikings, but how do you kind of view the rest of the division?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much the pessimistic Vikings fan, so I can very much see a reason how they fumble it down their leg and actually give this, and give it away to Detroit or Green Bay. To me personally, I think Chicago is still very much, a year or two away. I think they kind of signaled that through the draft. They obviously did try and get some young playmakers around Justin Fields, but I think seeing that come together this quickly is a pretty tall task. So I do think they probably still finish, in the bottom of the NFC North. And I think, it's going to be a spot where maybe Kirk Cousins can win this for the Minnesota Vikings, but they've had, I would say, a lot of turnover on their defense, and they didn't necessarily have the unit, I would say, that can really, solidify a run through the NFC. So I don't really buy into the Minnesota Vikings. They do have a couple guys, coming back that they drafted last year that kind of did have, a red shirt type season, like you mentioned earlier, and Louis Sign. Maybe those guys can contribute and kind of come together, with Brian Flores and actually remake that entire defense. But I think that's a really tall task in 1 year as well. So then you are relying on Kirk Cousins to win you some big games, and we just haven't seen that happen, I would say, consistently enough to buy into the Minnesota Vikings. So I think it's Detroit's, division to lose. Maybe there's a case for Jordan Love. Obviously, he did flash some ability last year. If he can kind of come out of the gate, it does seem like the Packers have added enough pieces in place. But I think the concern for me has to be the Packers and Jordan Love being that top end type playmaker. And I think that the little bit of unknown in there, very much solidifies, I would say, Detroit is winning this division right now.
Our friends at FanDuel of the Lions, over-under wins at 9.5 right now. Obviously, they won 9 last year. You do some data and certainly some betting stuff for PFF. How do you kind of look at that?
Yeah, we do kind of like it, and we are pretty close to the betting market on their win total. So I don't know if I would have like a strong play either way. I do think, in the NFC, like they stack up basically with like the 17th most difficult schedule right now. So very mean expectation for that. If they do win 1 or 2 of those games against better opponents, like they're very much going to be, in the driver's seat and get over that win total number. But we're kind of at that 9.5 game win total expectation, kind of like you mentioned from our friends at FanDuel.
All right. What else is there anything else missing? You look at the Lions, you go, all right, Montgomery and Gibbs now instead of Jamal Williams and Swift. Some people look at that as possibly an upgrade. Laporta at tight end is a weapon that may be similar to what they had in first half Hawkinson last year. The O-line is very good. Defensively, certainly Aiden Hutchinson. You mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown on offense, but then Aiden and some up-and-coming guys on the D-line. Linebacker, they think they got better with Campbell in the secondary they upgraded. Where are they strong? Where are they weak?
So it is going to be interesting what they get from Marvin Jones kind of at that, secondary wide receiver position early on without Jamison Williams. Like, to me, Jamison Williams was a guy that I was really high on. Obviously, would have liked to see him do a little bit more last year. So the fact that he's out, through the first 7 games of the season, like that's a little bit of a concern. But I do think when he is back in the fold, like they do kind of have him as the deep receiving option. Marvin Jones can very much kind of fill that role as well. But I think that's kind of getting to that point after the first 7 games of the season is a little bit of concern for me outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown. So they are going to need Sam Laporta to kind of step up right away. Very good, I would say, from, a run blocking perspective and even pass blocking, but how much can he do, outside of just over the middle type routes, I think is a question as well. So who kind of alleviates that secondary receiver position? Is it Jahmyr Gibbs as well? And is he going to get a lot of those long down and distance type looks over David Montgomery? I think that is very much an option, especially early on. And if that happens, I do think the Lions are very much trending in the right direction offensively. So those are kind of the questions offensively. And then, defensively, you mentioned it, there are a few guys very much emerging, in the trenches sort of thing, but who can consistently generate pressure outside of Aiden Hutchinson? I think that's kind of got to be the concern. Obviously, you want to alleviate any sort of, stress on this secondary as they kind of gel and round into the form. So any pressure that you can provide up front, it is going to be a huge boon to this defense. And I think that's got to be, the only other question I would say right now for this Detroit Lions team as a whole.
Ben, you knocked it out of the park, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Have a great show.
You got it. There he is, Ben Brown, with us from Pro Football Focus at PFF_Ben Brown. He's been with us here on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Lions. Tomorrow night's show will be an evening show following the schedule release. Stick with us.